Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. We're back. I am Ajahn Sona. And let's proceed. Please make yourself comfortable in the question bar. And let's proceed with a question from the question bar. Pia.
Ajahn, I first want to mention that today we had our annual general meeting, and that's a time when we recount our activities of the past year and our financial situation and other details to share with the larger community. Do you have any comments about how it went?
Well, I've done this how many times? 28 times, 29 times or something like that. The Society, Birken Forest Monastery Charitable Society was established 28, 29 years ago. And so we have an annual general meeting, which says all of the things that we did during the year, the community and myself and the other monks and monastics, stewards, and whether we got enough support to proceed with the running of the monastery, etc., all the activities. So it's been very interesting to watch each year. Things have gotten better in a sense each year, and we're approaching a kind of a golden age of completion, and especially the refinements of the actual physical monastery. So a lot of you join us in this virtual monastery, which is very cozy. You get to sit on your kitchen chair or your studio chair and watch. But there is a physical monastery as well, which is substantial-sized buildings and property in the middle of the wilderness, which is off-grid as well. And this has been a long process, labor. In fact, it's still going on. We're finishing off renovations, which is what we're aiming to do, is finally put a bow on it and finish the project. These monasteries in the West, there are a number of branch monasteries and associated monasteries with the Thai forest tradition, going back to particularly Ajahn Chah, scattered throughout the world, and we arrive with basically nothing, and eventually people in the cultures around us discover Theravada Buddhism, or especially the forest tradition, and they join the community, and these then buildings have to be made and properties purchased, etc. So this can take 25, 30 years if you're lucky. All of them have, and some of them are even, I think Amaravati in England is perhaps 40 years old now, and it's still doing a kind of a final building project. So this takes considerable patience and effort, and community support, and monastics involved in the planning and execution of all of the plans and buildings. Plus this medium of the virtual monastery reaching out around the world. So once a year we reflect on the whole year, and we make it public as well. You can access on our website, you can access the notes from the annual general meeting. This annual general meeting is a requirement, actually, of the Canadian government. I guess most of the countries in the West where monasteries are established, Buddhist monasteries, they're established as charitable societies, and the governments require, close accounting of all the donations and what you've done with them, etc. So it's an extra layer of demand on the monastery and the monastics, etc., to account for all this stuff. But it keeps everybody honest and credible, and it makes things public as well. So it has a function. Okay, so yes, it was a very good one, and I've been. In a few months, have been back in Canada for 30 years from the first shack monastery. which was the beginning of things. And so we're in quite a finished, spacious, and orderly monastery now. And it's been quite a journey. Not terrible kind of journey. It's been actually quite consistently positive. Things worked out in a very linear way, despite all of the possibilities of going sideways on these things. It has worked out pretty consistently in a linear direction. So we'll see how it goes from now on. Okay, let's go on to a Dhamma question, Pia.
Our first question is from the question bar, from Emperor Palpatine. The Buddha attained enlightenment in the fourth jhana, but earlier he gave up on the arupa meditations already. However, later on remembered achieving the first jhana as a child and realized that it is the path. Can you explain how he went past the fourth jhana before to the seventh and eighth, but never became enlightened then?
Well, a lot of people have tried to explain that. And I tend to think that the explanations are somewhat of a failure. I see a lot of inconsistencies in the whole story. And I think it's all right to presume that there could be inconsistencies in some of the accounts of the life of the Buddha before he is the Buddha, as a bodhisattva, as a seeker. That some of these things are put together afterwards and so forth. So, yeah, it's very difficult to explain, and I think I wouldn't try too hard to explain it. It doesn't line up very well. The attainment during his 6 years of seeking, between age 29 and 35, he fell in with a whole group of marginalized samanas that were doing various extraordinary practices, some of them very, very harmful to the body, very self-tormenting type of practices. Some of them apparently were doing these advanced meditations. This is called arupa meditation. Basically, arupa ayatanas or jhanas, and usually they're not referred to as jhanas, but they are jhanas. They are very, very advanced, and he was said to have gone up to the meditation on nothing and on the least perception. This is the seventh and eighth arupa jhanas. And then it didn't work out, wasn't satisfactory, although he was declared by his teacher to be a master of this and equivalent to the teacher, and that he is invited to teach, etc. So then he walks away from it. It seems to be mixed in with a kind of bodily starvation technique as well as arupa jhanas. So it's a bit of a confused story, and he starts to eat and is sitting out of the sun under a bodhi tree by a river. And there he remembers from his childhood, very early in his childhood, maybe he's 5 or 6 years old, attaining the first jhana, surrounded by family, surrounded by loving kindness and food, perhaps, and gentleness, and he suddenly thinks that's the way. That's it, what he calls it a pleasure not to be feared. He says that is a pleasure not to be feared. So he enters into it, and he ends up in the fourth jhana, rupa jhana. And from the fourth jhana, he experiences the proliferation of these supernormal psychic capacities, of the remembrance of his previous lives, etc. So, by the way, there's a big discussion about whether the presumption usually in the commentaries is that after attaining the fourth jhana, he emerges from it and has access to these supernormal memory capacities and observation of the nature of KAMMA, cause and effect between lives, etc. Others, and especially recently, I've read a few monks say, well, it never says that he emerged from that fourth jhana. He just, in the fourth jhana, these things went on. Anyway, you can see various points of controversy in these things, and one shouldn't be too hasty to tidy up the stories. I think it's all right if the stories are a little messy, and then maybe as time goes by, some clarity will come to you. And perhaps it's not totally necessary that we all clear up these mysteries. These are extraordinary attainments. It's kind of like talking about how did Einstein come up with this theory of relativity. It is very mysterious. He claimed that he spent most of his time in a fairly empty room in Bern, Switzerland, playing the violin and just kind of being in a quiet space, not talking to anybody. That's how he came up with it. So very interesting. Unfortunately, we're not Einstein. So no matter how much you play the violin or in a quiet room, relativity doesn't come to you. So we have to use whatever devices, ways that we can to attain some sort of emotional liberation, enlightenment ourselves, whatever works for us. So the mystery of the processes of the Buddha's mind may not ever be fully understood. And also the mysteries of the inconsistencies in these stories may never be finally resolved as well. What I like to talk about, though, is this charming story of having tormented himself, being a strong, determined man, falling in with other macho practitioners who I can see it as a kind of a extreme sport, kind of spiritual practice where who can starve themselves the most or stay out in the sun the most. There's a lot of macho stuff happening in there. And finally, he has some sense. He says, enough of this. This is just self-destructive. And I think a lot of men have found themselves in that with various companions in the macho life. Said, enough of this. And then he recalls his early childhood, where he's surrounded by, I think, his aunt and some women who are nice to him, and he's being treated very nicely, and this is where he spontaneously attains the first jhana as a child. And this is kind of an introduction of the feminine part of this. This is like, get rid of this extreme sort of showing off who can torture themselves the most, who can put up with the most pain. And at the same time, it's not back to the indulgences of perhaps a teenage prince in a sensuous palace, exploring the pleasure, found it shallow and left. So he's finding the middle path, finds it in the beauty of this relaxed peace and purification of the mind that came to him fairly easy as a child. So he has become as a little child once more. By the way, that phrase, if you're not familiar with it, is from the New Testament. Jesus advises people to become as a little child once more. And from there, he proceeds. That is the beginning, the opening of the path, that one should be gentle with oneself. There is no element of self-harm or self-ill will in this. There can't be any. At the same time, it's not just a sensuous indulgence either. And it's available to the mind. If the mind is virtuous and being pulled away from the worldly things and also from the sort of self-tormenting kind of spiritual attitudes, then one can possibly access this through the first jhana. The story of the seventh and eighth arupa jhana wouldn't be very helpful to anybody. It's an extremely refined and almost inconceivable kind of meditation, so it's no place to start. So maybe that's the sense of the story, is that, you know, you got to give people a reasonable place to start. And the first jhana, remembered as a child, is a place to start. So that is a kind of a, after, you know, hearing these stories for 40 years and more, there are some holes in the stories and some good ways of understanding the story as well. But the point of the exercise is to make something useful for yourself out of these accounts, out of these stories, rather than treat it as, look, we've got to get to the bottom of this as literal and perfect history. Yeah. Okay, let's try the next question.
Next question is from the live stream from Indra in Canada. In the Sabba Sutta, the Buddha calls the 6 kinds of consciousness as the all, and nothing outside of these can be known, due to it being outside our domain. However, the Buddha also talks about the 5 aggregates with 4 other things that are not kinds of consciousness. Can you explain this seeming contradiction?
Well, I wouldn't call them contradictions. The 5 khandhas are, you know, the body is added to it, and it's fairly obvious to us that the body is something in humans, for instance. And then the rest of the four other khandhas are perception, consciousness, which so consciousness is mentioned in the khandhas. So we can that's an overlap. The 6 sense consciousness, and then consciousness as an aggregate of the 5 aggregates. So that there's one of them that's completely overlapping. Volition and perception are the other 2, and then there's feeling. And so, in a sense, these 5 aggregates are known through consciousness. How else would you know them? And consciousness also is not devoid of perception. By the way, so we were just talking in the previous question about the arupa jhanas and everything. There's one sort of exalted state which is sometimes called the 9th arupa jhana, the 9th meditation. And that is called the cessation of perception and feeling. Interesting. So 2 of the khandhas are perception and feeling. And apparently the teachers of the traditions outside of Buddhism had arrived at the 8th arupa jhana, which is this minimum perception. It's sometimes referred to as neither perception nor non-perception, but that's a peculiar Indian way of saying minimum perception. Feeling apparently is still available, and just a slight degree of perception is there. The Buddha introduces this exalted attainment, which is only available, as I recall, to the 3rd and 4th stages of enlightenment. The people who have attained the 3rd and 4th stage of enlightenment can, but maybe don't, enter this state called the cessation of perception and feeling. And there you have the disappearance of 2 of the khandhas, you know. But it doesn't. Consciousness is not said to vanish there. Anyway, this six bases of consciousness are said sometimes to be all. It's all that you know and all you can know. But you know the khandhas through them, through the 6 types of consciousness. They are eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So you know feelings through perception and a consciousness. And so feelings occur to consciousness. The body, the awareness of the body occurs to consciousness. So you can know your body through sights, through sounds, through smells, through tastes, through touches, and through thought processes, etc. So I don't think there's a big contradiction in this at all. By the way, on the search for the self, so the Buddha uses usually the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates, which are body, feelings, perception, volition, and consciousness. He says you can search in each of these aggregates, in each of these khandhas. The khandha just means lump, kind of a lump, a pile of something. And you won't find anything that's worthy of being called yourself. And so this is considered, by the way, the Buddha doesn't start with, there is no self. So this is where it's confusing sometimes. The Buddha, sometimes people say, he said, there is no self. The Buddha is a very careful logician. And here's what we know, of course, from modern logic as well, and you may have heard this phrase before, you cannot prove a negative. Bertrand Russell, the famous 20th century logician, when he's asked about belief in God, he said, well, I can't say, you can't prove a negative. I can't say there is no God, just like I can't say for sure that there isn't a teapot floating behind the moon. On the dark side of the moon, there might be a teapot. Or I can't say there are no such objects in the universe unless I search every part of the universe. So the Buddha is a logician, and so this is why he says, look in the 5 khandhas, which are a pretty complete description of what a human is. And in each of them, you will not find a self. All that we regard as self naively, when we look closely at it and look at how it works, we do not find a self there. So here's what he leads you to. He doesn't just say, there's no self. He says, there is no self in the body, there is no self in feelings, there is no self in perception, there is no self in consciousness, there is no self in volition. I therefore say, there is no self to be found. Well, that is a very careful, logical statement. We looked in all of the likely hiding places for the self, and we did not find one. So that's a very careful approach to the search for the self. And that's how the Buddha structures it. He is a careful logician. He says, when you deny that something exists, you are attempting to prove a negative, which is impossible. So quite often people don't view the Buddha as a logician, but some of the ways he looks at language processes and logic and so forth were not even arrived at in the West until the 20th century. It's quite amazing. He's very careful, very sharp mind. Enough of that. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Nadia in Lyon, France. Dear Ajahn, I'm deeply grateful for your teachings. How can karma be explained in the context of population growth? Are more beings being reborn into the human realm? Is this because of the collective human karma? Yeah,
some people, if you go to a university course sometimes in and they maybe in philosophy, and they will perhaps this idea of reincarnation comes up in the philosophy course, and the professor may say, so here's why it can't be. The population is increasing. Therefore, where are the new people? Where are the new souls coming from? If people are just reborn again and again, then how can it be? See, this disproves the idea of reincarnation. That is incredibly naive. You should be fired from your logic professorship. It's like saying, well, look here. There's a certain limited amount of water on the planet, right? It rains into the ocean evaporates, goes back in there. So how is it possible that the sea level could rise? And it's rising in modern times. It can't be. And then somebody says, yeah, well, ice, dude, ice is melting. And therefore sea level is rising. And another reason the sea level rises is the sea is warming, and warm water expands. So you have neglected to include the other phase of water, which is ice, in the possibilities for the increase of ocean, etc. So this is the case for the Buddhist universe, is that the number of beings in the universe is said to be incalculable. It is not possible to calculate. And they're in multiple dimensions. And if you think multiple dimensions of beings is far-fetched, do check out the physics of multiple universes, which perfectly straight-faced physicists insist is the only proper explanation of how things work, is that there are incalculable numbers of universes, multiple universes. And so I don't see that there's a great problem with the Buddhist idea that there are multiple dimensions of beings, and that they are moving between realms. Occasionally, beings from the animal realm move up into the human. Humans move down into the animal realm. There are divine realms, sort of heavenly realms, which have incalculable numbers of beings, which are... So it conflicts with the Christian idea that heaven is eternal and hell is eternal. In Buddhism, which describes the heavens in great detail 500 years before Christ, also describes the hells, by the way, 500 years before Christ, in great detail. And there are multiple levels and dimensions of this, and beings are passing out of these realms. They're passing into them and out of them as well. Nothing is eternal, so beings are making the rounds, and this is called samsara. And so sometimes the population of the human population increases, sometimes it decreases. But it's a bit of a, as we say in physics, energy, and neither energy or matter really is created or destroyed, but only transforms. So in the same way that the apparent destruction of a being is actually just it's not a destruction, it's neither a creation nor a destruction, it's just a transformation from one phase to another. So the human phase into the angelic phase, or the angelic phase into the human phase, or the human phase into the animal phase. This shouldn't be so hard to compute when we have the theory of evolution. Beings are absolutely kind of flowing from one species into the... Species are not fixed, they're fluid. So one species evolves fluidly into another species. And some species increase and others decrease at various times. And they're all essentially without any core essence to them. They're all fluid and changing and changeable. Yeah. So that's a brief explanation. Yeah.
Next question is from the live stream from Terry in New York City. Sometimes you've mentioned that life is a horror show. Knowing that, how does gratitude fit into the Buddhist path? Thank you.
Well, in the midst of the horror show, there's plenty to be grateful for if you have been spared some horror. It's not, life is not continuously a horror show, but you can see that certain times in certain people's lives, it is a horror show. Right? Just read the front page of any newspaper these days. What's going on in the world? Endless killing and starvation and terrible diseases and the inevitable death that every being must face, and the inevitable aging and the teetering towards that, and the anxiety, the mental health crisis and the drug crisis and the on and on. And in the midst of all that, there are moments of kindness and moments of information which allows you to keep your sanity in the midst of this. When people don't have a philosophy of life, a view of life which can deal with these catastrophic events and the inevitability of death and loss, etc., they also can lose their mental well-being. They can lose all in their sanity, and then they plunge into a kind of a living hell. So if you can find, the greatest gift would be a view of life which can handle the catastrophes which are right in front of our face. And by the way, if you're smug enough to think that, well, it doesn't affect me, just that's a very naive view of things, that you're safe. You're not safe. So we live, everybody is in peril all the time. We manage to forget about it, and that's one way to get through it without going mad. But better than that is some advice which allows you to see it with clear eyes, and at the same time be equanimous, and also infuse the situation with the beautiful emotion of loving kindness, even in the midst of these disasters. So that is to be extremely grateful for. The gratitude flows out of that. And gratitude is, when you really have learned something, the first thing that will come to your tongue is, I'm so grateful for that. That is the natural expression of you really have learned something valuable when you say, I'm so grateful. So that's the role of gratitude in this. Next question, Pia.
Next question is also from the live stream from the One in British Columbia, Canada. In SN 36.21, the Buddha rejects the view that everything we feel, whether pleasant, painful, or neutral, is a result of past actions, karma, and says some things are a result of bile, climate, carelessness, assault, etc. How are we to understand karma and its role?
Well, ultimately, it's beyond the capacity of even a very bright human to a full knowledge of it is beyond the capacity. Just like many things in physics, or I think there's I'm not a physicist, nor do I play one on television. So there is, I think, a three-body calculation problem where three bodies are orbiting each other in space and attempting to plot out where they will be in a long time with the three interacting with each other. Just three bodies interacting with each other is incalculable. So that's the limits of some of our hardest sciences, that we can't even plot out 1,000 years where these three bodies will be that orbit around each other 1,000 years from now. If we can't do that, can you imagine trying to plot out the intricacies of moral cause and effect playing out between infinite numbers of beings. So what we go back to is what the Buddha suggests, is that you don't know all the precision about it, but you know that greed, hatred, and delusion, intentional greed, hatred, and delusion, speaking or acting upon it, will have negative results, unwanted results. Whereas generosity, kindness, and clarity, intentional, will have desirable results. And so that's where we leave it. We just say, that's my guidelines. I can't get a super calculator to actually tell me all of the intricacies of how this interacts with the other laws. By the way, in Buddhism, there are karma or KAMMA is only one law. Buddhism acknowledges the laws of physics. It's called, by the way, these laws are called niyamas. Niyama, niyama. And there is uttu niyama, which is what we would probably in modern times call physics. And then there is bija niyama, which we would probably call biology. And then there's chitta niyama, which is the laws of psychology. And then there is kamma niyama, the laws of causality in the moral dimension. And then there's another one called Dhamma niyama, the law, how all of those other four interact with each other. So it's like there's a hospital, a police force, a civil force, a planning office in a city, and then there's the mayor of the city, and the mayor sort of supervises how the city is run, which is really an interaction of those four departments. And so you can see the complexity when you have a fire department has to interact with a hospital and a police department at the same time. You can see probably in this chaos of the Middle East, the Israeli-Gaza kind of conflict, you see this incredible interactions of medical places, of soldiers, fire, all of these things interacting, and you can see the complexity of the interaction of the different kind of processes. So the Buddha is saying it's not just karma. There are biological effects, there are psychological effects, and there are physical effects, and they're all interplaying with karma as well. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Our next question is from Zuri in Cambridgeshire, United Kingdom. Dear Longpoor, I have recently taken up the 32 parts in order to abate the pull of sexual ideation. Apart from that goal, I have also found it quite calming to practice the 32 parts, both on the mat and while walking around outside. Sometimes the mental word even slips away, and I find myself merely visualizing, feeling the parts. Is that okay? Also, I have simply chanted the parts aloud. I have never simply chanted the parts aloud. Is that recommended?
Well, it starts with, but remember that in the time of the Buddha, it's a memory culture, so the only way you're ever going to learn these. And by the way, you learn the first 5 parts of the body. This 32 parts of the body is recommended particularly for monastics, because monastics have to live a celibate life, a life which is aimed at non-lust. And they don't start out as non-lusty. So they have aspirations to that, but they enter probably as a normal human being. And they have to deal with human nature. So this is kind of natural, very powerful natural urges and so forth. So the Buddha gives them divide the body up into 32 parts, and the attractiveness of the body can disappear in that. So at your novice ordination, you're giving, they instruct you to repeat after me: head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin. And then the novice says head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin. And they ask them to say it backwards and forwards. You got to know this inside out. By the way, so the first 5 parts of the 32 are the head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, and skin. Now, when you think about that, that's the external body. And when you isolate them, like a head hair, a single head hair, is dead. A body hair is dead. You can pluck it out. It falls off. You can cut it, etc. It's dead. Nails, your fingernails, are dead. Teeth, the structure of the teeth, the outside structure is dead. It's only the root that's alive. And the skin, the surface of the skin is actually dead. Your skin is peeling off all the time. So this is the attractive part of the body. So when you're attracted to another person's body, when you find that their head hair or their body hair, their nails, their teeth, their skin is attractive, you can reflect that all that you're attracted to is the dead part of them. The living part is usually not attractive. It's the gushy stuff inside. The organs and the nerve endings and so forth, and that nobody's really all that inspired by that. So the Buddha asks you to divide these things up to quell this. Now, whether you do it by naming them, but you really want to just think about it and visualize what it really is. When you take it apart, what is it? It's an illusion, you know. So this is the point of the exercise. So how you do it doesn't matter, and you don't have to chant it out loud. It's just that's the only way to convey it. If in a culture that didn't have written words, they would always do it by oral transmission. So they would just say, you know, here are the 32 parts. Remember them, memorize them. Okay, so yeah, next.
Our next question is from the live stream, and it ties in with the question you just answered, maybe perhaps the next step. This is from Charlie in the Czech Republic. Dear Ajahn, I have a strong inclination for ASUBHA practice, and it works great in terms of insight for me. Can this meditation also be used for deepening my samadhi?
Yes. ASUBHA, Charlie, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, Charlie's asking about ASUBHA. Subha means beautiful, and ASUBHA means not beautiful. And so, for instance, the 32 parts of the body are considered ASUBHA, or not beautiful. And so can you, when you're doing these meditation exercises, can you actually enter into a jhana state where there's joy and ease? Not that the head hair or body hair or something is causing you joy. It's that the concentration, the focus, the absorption in this process is joyful. So, and the answer is yes. Each of these parts can be meditated upon, and if your mind is completely interested in it, and it's the interest that causes the joy. So when you're really interested in this, then joy and ease of body can occur. And so, yes, ASUBHA meditation subjects can achieve the first jhana. Yeah.
Our next question is from the live stream from Marquis. My question is about what is the KAMMA associated with playing a video game where you have to kill other people and animals? Is it playing such a game breaking the first precept? For context, this has come up in my life as my 9-year-old son has become very interested in such a game. Not only am I trying to keep the first precept and also do right as a father.
Yeah, it's not a violation of the first precept. The first precept requires that you actually kill somebody intentionally. You know, you kill another conscious being intentionally, and that's the first precept. So to think about it, or to play in your mind a war game or something like that, is not a violation of that precept. However, yeah, it's an exciting kind of fantasy world, and I think that a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds go off to war because it's kind of part of human psychology that it could be fun, going off to kill or be killed, the adventure of it. And that's the problem, is that it's pretty naive. And once you see them when they come back, and they've been there doing that killing, it's devastating. It's not a game. It turns out it's not a game. So the thing you have to sort out for your son is, a game and reality are two different things. It's the most horrific, terrible thing to see a living being who does not want to die get killed. And so this is, it's not a wholesome activity, but it's not equivalent to murder, but it's not a good thing to encourage. If you want to play a game, play tennis. There's all kinds of really cool games to play, and some of them will improve your coordination and last your whole life. And some of them are not. They're negative and encourage a false sense of adventure, which is not wholesome. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Ross in Minnesota, United States. Dear Ajahn, regarding generosity, if someone who has a lot of money gives $10 and someone who has very little gives $10, would the karmic effects be the same for both people?
If the mental state that the person is giving and the object that they're giving to is the same, then the person who has very little money and gives $10 is probably going to get a more positive resultant from that than the person who has a lot of money and gives $10, because it's really a proportion of the money that you have, and the proportion that you give of the money you have is the quantity of generosity. So for a billionaire to give $10 away, there's hardly any generosity there at all, is there? But for somebody who's got $20 and they're giving half of their money away, it's a significant amount. So it's a proportion of what you have is the quantity of generosity, is this issue of giving and the karmic effects. By the way, when I say karmic, it doesn't mean comedic. It means karmic effects. A lot of people don't know it, but so there is how the formula works is the quality of the giver. So if the giver is of high moral character and gives to a person of high moral character, it exponentially increases the resultants of the gift. If a person of low moral character gives to a person of low moral character, it's exponentially less return for the resultant of this. If a person of low moral character gives to a person of high moral character, it is much more beneficial or much more positive resultant than if they had given to a person of low moral character. However, giving even to an animal, even feeding a bird, has multiple returns to it. So even feeding an animal generously will return many fold to the person who's the giver. Yes.
Next question from the live stream is from Delaney in Florida. Are there Buddhas in other planetary systems other than ours? The universe is so unimaginably huge, the number of habitable planets in our galaxy could number in the billions.
Well, it's not discounted. I certainly wouldn't try to make a personal a claim of knowledge for this, whether there are other Buddhas in the rest of the universe. It would seem that it's entirely possible. They do talk about world systems arising, and a number of Buddhas arising in the duration of a world system. This is a tremendous amount of time going by. From Buddhist cosmology has similar sort of ideas of time for planetary systems as modern cosmology does. In the West, we've had extraordinary naive and minimalist ideas of the age of the Earth, of the age of the universe, until very, very recently. Buddhism has always had these staggeringly long durations, but they've never said that the universe is immovable or eternal. It's more like cyclical. The sort of the Big Bang kind of idea is more like evolving universes. They evolve and devolve. They come into being from previous cycles, etc. And during these long periods of time where conscious, intelligent life arises, during that time there's a certain possibility of a Buddha arising, but whole world systems can go by without a Buddha arising. And sometimes you can get 3 or 4 or 5 in a series in history arising. One of the interesting things they say is that another Buddha does not arise until the teachings of the previous Buddha are forgotten, that it has completely vanished, that the sasana that's established, that kind of the religious teaching structure, the sangha, etc., is set up and it endures for perhaps many, many millennia, but a new Buddha does not arrive while the previous Buddha's teachings are still in existence.
Next question from the live stream is from Swazi. Did Jesus visit and learn from the Buddhist monks?
Good question, and a lot of people wonder about that, and people have wild theories about it. One of the things, it used to be a kind of there's books out of there. Jesus went to India. He died in India. After they drugged him, this is how they got out. He got him off the cross, and then he thought, I got to get out of this place. They're trying to kill me. And then he went to a civilized country like India, died there at 105, and there's all kinds of stories, none of which are confirmable. I would say that I'm really very interested in the study of like what is actual history, how much communication was available, how much did the people at the time of Christ know about Buddhism, how much of that information was available. And it turns out there quite a bit of information was known to people at that time. That's almost 500 years after the Buddha. Most of the information comes through Greek acquaintanceship with Buddhism. And the Greeks were also quite dominant throughout all of Asia and the Middle East and parts of Europe, right out to the west coast of Europe. The Greeks were, that was the universal language at the time. So the New Testament, by the way, is in Greek. The Greeks were very interested in writing things down, and they recorded all kinds of ideas that came from Buddhism. There were coins with the Buddha's head on it and all kinds of Buddhist symbols floating around long before Christ. So it is possible that Christ didn't go to India or study with Buddhist monks, that he maybe went to the corner cafe where they were chatting about the various philosophies at the time, Socrates and Plato, which would have been they would have been fully aware of the Greek philosophers, and possibly in Greek even. They might have. It's quite possible that Christ spoke Greek, maybe as a second language, but supposedly he spoke Aramaic. And you see actually stone inscriptions in northern India, in places that were known to be Buddhist, that are inscribed in Aramaic and Greek, and they are quotes from the Buddha, are mentioning the Buddha in Greek and Aramaic. So the people who spoke Greek and Aramaic, which was quite international across the whole Middle East, were aware of the Buddha. So a person, if I don't know whether Christ is actually a historical figure or not, but he seems to be a fairly bright guy, seems to be highly aware, very intelligent, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had come across some Buddhist ideas at the corner cafe. Or maybe even maybe they even had a bookshelf there he could probably read, and might have had some things that explained that. So I don't think he has to go to exotic lengths to go to India to get influences. We must be aware that, of course, Buddhism is much, much earlier than Christianity, and so there's centuries for it to percolate around the Middle East. The Persian Empire also had deep encounters with India. There are Indian soldiers in the Persian army which attacks the Greeks. The Persians enlisted Indians before, 400 years before Christ. Indians were in the Persian army and fighting in battles as far as Greece. So there is no problem of the transmission of ideas floating around, awareness of each other's cultures, etc. So this is a very interesting area of history. I am deeply involved in it at the moment, and I hope to give some presentations on this whole area with maps and with good history, etc. Not imaginative history, but just good kind of evidential history. Yeah. Okay, we are at the end of our Q&A for this week, and we presume we will be back next week as well. So stay tuned for that.